rightly mentioned that India is growing at a very rapid pace, and that's quite interesting. And it is something that I'm looking forward to, right? So now that brings me to my next question: like, what are the key driving factors? Like you mentioned that India is growing rapidly, right? So what are the key driving factors behind that growth?
Some of the factors that are driving this digital technology, right? As I mentioned, ultimately it comes to profitability of the business and the safety, right? Safety and profitability, and how you transform your raw materials into your outputs, right? In a more efficient way, then that essentially becomes your, increase in the margins, increase in the profitability, right?
So hi Jagdish, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Mohit. How are you?
Great, great, great. So, before we delve into the session, let me set the context and pace of the discussion first. So, today we'll be talking about, how you can achieve operational excellence at an industrial plant. And today we have Mr. Jagdish Gattu, who is CEO at UptimeAI.com, right? So, before we get into the set of questions and kickstart the today's discussion, I'm curious to know more about your journey. So, if you can shed some light over there, it'll be great.
Yeah, sure, Mohit. So, I started my journey back in India, where I did my undergrad at IIT Madras. After that, I did my master's in the US. Then spent around about a decade doing hands-on industrial data analytics. I worked all the way from automotive companies to defense companies like US Air Force, US Army, NASA, and then also with energy companies and so on. So that was my experience, across the industries, doing hands-on data analytics. And after that, I decided to do my business degree and then, started my second half of my career at GE. So at GE, I spent another 7 to 8 years, wherein I managed, product lines or product opportunities in the space of smart instrumentation as well as, their predictive maintenance suite of software. So a lot of the stuff that we are doing at Uptime AI is based on the connecting the dots between our discussions, my experience working in the industry with various large scale customers, what kind of pain points they have, what are the challenges with the current solutions, and then how the industrial analytics space itself is evolving, and how can we use that to achieve better profitability for industrial plants and achieve that operational excellence.
So, can you give me an overview of the industry size and the market dynamics that are there presently?
Right, right. See, I mean, manufacturing itself is a pretty large sector. If you look at as a percentage of GDP, manufacturing is probably around, 10 to 15%, depending on the country, right? Comparing manufacturing to telecom or automotive, right? Automotive and telecom, they're probably around, 5 to 7%. So manufacturing is pretty large, right? Now, if you look at the market, overall market size, we are talking, more than 50 billion, right? Overall manufacturing as a whole. Now, within that, the market dynamics, when we look at it, manufacturing is also a pretty old industry. I mean, and like every other industry, the manufacturing sector also wants to improve profitability, right? They want to generate more profits for their business. But at the same time, there are several headwinds, against which are actually counteracting to that. So, for example, you see that the machines are getting older, right? There are a lot of plants which are over 20 years old. A lot of machines which are decades old, right? Which are in operations. At the same time, the kind of operations are getting more complex. The technology in manufacturing is also getting more and more involved, right? At the same time, you're getting lots and lots of data, right? Now sensors are cheap, so you are also finding that there is so much of data that is available to you. And the other real important factor that the market is also seeing is the change in the demographics of the workforce. Back in the day, the people who joined this manufacturing sector in the 80s, right, in the 90s, they are also now retiring, and a lot of younger, less experienced workforce is also coming in. So these are essentially the dynamics in the market that are pushing the industries to look for newer, more innovative solutions to continue to improve the profitability, continue to make sure that the operations are safer for the overall business.
Correct. Interesting bit right there. So now next question that comes to my mind is, like, when you compare Indian market or Indian manufacturing market to the rest of the world, so how mature do you think our market is, and what are the key highlights over there, if you can shed some light over there?
Yeah, yeah. This is a great point because, as I was saying, right? I mean, the dynamics in the market are pretty much, across the globe, as we mentioned, in terms of increasing data, getting more complex, machines getting older, and that's why a lot of the industry is going towards digital solutions. Now, if we specifically look at this kind of, new and digital solutions, Indian market probably is not the first to lap on to these, digital solutions. In some of the Western countries like North America, they have actually started on this journey earlier, right? But at the same time, I have to say that the Indian manufacturing sector is now catching up with a vengeance. We are seeing a lot of the industries, across the board, actually, really putting a lot of emphasis on digital solutions, digitalization, and I'm seeing that, across all the industries. Traditionally, there are some specific industries which have always been ahead of the curve, but now, especially in India, we are seeing that all the way from more mature industries like power, like oil and gas, right, to renewables, to cement, to FMCG, food and beverages, right. Everywhere we are seeing across the board a lot of initiatives in terms of catching up. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 3 to 5 years, India even inches, further and actually, crosses over some of the other countries in the market in terms of, digital technologies for manufacturing.
Correct, correct, right. So you rightly mentioned that India is growing at a very rapid pace, and that's quite interesting. And it is something that I'm looking forward to, right? So now that brings me to my next question: like, what are the key driving factors? Like you mentioned that India is growing rapidly, right? So what are the key driving factors behind that growth, according to you?
Right, right. See, the some of the factors that are driving this digital technology, right? As I mentioned, ultimately it comes to profitability of the business and the safety, right? Safety and profitability of operations. Now, in manufacturing, if we think about the business, they, simplistically, if you look at it, there is your raw material that is coming in, right? And that could be your energy source, that could be just your raw material which you're transforming, and then you have your operations which are actually transforming your raw materials into something, your outputs, right. And then you get your outputs which you are selling. Now many times the inputs and the outputs are, the price points and so on are defined by the markets themselves. For example, there is some variability that you can add to it, but still, at the end of the day, a lot of it is defined by market dynamics. So for example, if you take a refinery, the crude price and then price of the gasoline or the petrol or diesel, right, is more or less defined by the market. But what's in your control is really about what happens in between that. Okay.
Correct,
And so if you are able to manage your operations and how you transform your raw materials into your outputs, right, in a more efficient way, then that essentially becomes your, increase in the margins, increase in the profitability, right? And so how do you, and that's one of the key factors in terms of, putting a lot of emphasis on operations and operational excellence, right? And if you look at operations per se, what are the different elements that probably drive this improvement or drive this profitability within operations? There are a few factors. One, you want to make sure that machines don't fail unnecessarily, right? Then you want to make sure that when they are running efficiently, meaning they are able to, work with the least amount of input and operate at the highest efficiency, right? So that you can minimize your raw materials and minimize your energy input, right? And when you do these two correctly, then what happens is automatically your maintenance costs go down, automatically your productivity increases, right? Your product variability decreases. and those all of those contribute to higher margins in in your business, right? And basically these are the and these are the driving factors, right? In terms of what you want to do. So ultimately what the operations teams are looking forward to doing is that when there is a problem, right, whether there's a machine problem, whether it is actually consuming more energy, right, you want to be able to identify it very quickly, right? Very, very early in its inception. And you want to solve the problem very, very fast, right? So that they don't become something really serious, right? And these two are the one of the two major factors that are actually driving the need for digital solutions to identify and fix the issues faster.
Correct, correct. Interesting. So, that, I'm curious to know more that, what is the solution that you are providing in the market and how is it different from probably other solutions out there, right? So if you
Right.
can explain that.
Right. See, what has happened over the years, right, is that when let's say in the early 2000s and so on, right, that was the era of how can we bring all the data, right? We want to make sure that we are collecting enough data that we can utilize, right? And so there was a lot of emphasis put on historians. Historians are nothing but where you store all the your sensor data and operational data, right? Installing the historians, being able to capture that data, right? And then towards 20, maybe 2010s, or the last decade or so, there was more emphasis on how can we now utilize this information, right? And then that's where people started playing with a lot of analytics. How can we process this data, analyze this data, right? But quickly people also, companies and industries and organizations have realized that, see, in a manufacturing plant, you can have anywhere between 5,000, 10,000 sensors, to even in a refinery you can have more than 100,000 sensors, okay, in more than 1,000 pieces of equipment. So if you want to, how can you really analyze 100,000 sensors, right, or worth of data on a continuous basis? If you are doing all of this, manually, right, using, even if you're using tools, you want to really have, higher scale. So the first issue is, you cannot have hundreds of data scientists looking at this mounts of information that you're getting. Number one, right? It doesn't scale very well, so you need to be able to very efficiently do it. Second is, you still need experts to understand and interpret the information in a way that you can actually take actions against that, right? And even these experts are limited in number. You cannot have hundreds of experts analyzing these alarms and alerts, right? Or insights coming from the data. And
Correct,
this is the major challenges in the industry, because it's nice to do a fun project or a pilot project, right? Where you can take one equipment, get one data, get one expert, and then try to have them working together to solve it. But then when you have 100 pumps or 1,000 pumps, right? That approach does not scale.
correct,
And so then that is how customers are looking for solutions which solve the problems in a specific way, such that they get the answers, rather than they don't want the data analysis tools. They want solutions which can give them answers, and that's what Uptime AI does. What we do is, for number one, we provide a solution which is our AI expert. Our solution name is AI expert. So it essentially helps operations teams to solve either reliability problems or performance related issues, weeks in advance, right? 4 times faster to resolve them, as well as with 3 times less effort, right? And the way we do that is, number one, our solution has high levels of automation in terms of data analytics, so that you don't need a data scientist to build all the models and deploy them manually. Second is, we have built-in system approach which helps with identifying the cause, the diagnosis, and we have built-in failure modes and recommendations for a lot of equipment, so that we guide the engineers in terms of what is the problem, how to fix it. And finally, we are pretty much, we are uniquely positioned in the way that we connect these two together, meaning when the operator does something, right? When the operator says this is able to solve this problem, or he says that it is not a good alert, we our solution is able to automatically adjust the models so that the models adjust, and then the next time a similar issue happens, either we are able to precisely point out even more accurately or avoid that alert completely, right? So that's how what we do is essentially solve the problems faster with less effort and across the scale.
Correct. Correct. That's quite interesting. But when you said that, the model can, learn from itself or learn from the things that are around, right? That's what is interesting bit out there, right? So I'm sure you have been in this market since past couple of years, and you might have seen this market evolve as well, right? And you might have also transitioned through COVID. So if you can highlight on that part, so
Yeah,
it'll.
yeah. So I think COVID has, as I was saying, I mean, in order to improve the profitability, right? People are looking to extract insights from the data. And to extract insights from the data, there are two main ingredients. One is the data science part, and the other part is the expertise, right? Which translates the information in the data inputs into contextual information, right? Now, with COVID, I think both of these aspects have become much more highlighted, right, during that COVID period. One, when you are not around, a lot of during the COVID period, people had to operate, remotely, even for these, heavy asset industries, and that meant that you could not actually see what was happening in the plant. So that
Correct.
means you have to rely on data, rather than your physical senses, right? And that put more emphasis on how can we process the data, right? At the same time, it also put a lot of emphasis on the expertise, because we have seen cases where experts could not be around, and especially the senior experts who were more prone to high casualty. They have to stay back, and that also put a lot of stress on the operations teams. And we have seen several incidents, actually, several accidents across the industries, whether it is explosions in power plants or leakages in chemical plants, right? Across India and across the globe, we have seen those. And that made also people realize the importance of how, to be prepared for these kind of, situations in the future. And I think that is what has increased the awareness in the market, and that's also another reason why all these industries, various industries, are now moving pretty fast. In where they don't have sensors, they are adding those sensors. Where they have those sensors, they are really looking for the next generation solutions to solve these problems, right?
Correct. Correct. Interesting. Right. So that brings me to my last question. Like, where do you position yourself or your firm rather in let's say maybe next 3 years or so?
Yeah, yeah. See, we consider ourselves as a thought leader in the industrial manufacturing space. As I was saying, see, when if you look at the overall industrialization journey, right? Back in the day when we started, utilizing machines, and then the next level of step up, right, came in when there was digital controls came in, right? That brought in a lot of automation, and that was a step up in manufacturing, right? Of productivity. And then after that, came the era of the IT, right? Wherein, you are gathering all the information, digitizing the information, right? And that was the whole era of sensors, IT, and so on, right? Now is the era of intelligence.
Correct.
It's not data everybody has right now, or it is easier to get the data, and people are getting the data, and a lot of companies have decades of data. Now the question is, how can I get intelligence out of it to solve the problems faster, such that I can make my operations more efficient, right?
Correct.
And we believe that Uptime AI is going to be that catalyst, which is going to, take that manufacturing industry to that next level of productivity, right? And our mission is to provide virtual advisor, AI-based virtual advisor for every manufacturing plant, so that our solution is going to decentralize expertise and help operators solve either failure-related, reliability-related issues or performance-related issues faster with less effort, right? And good thing is that we have right now we have even though we have started in 2019, today we have customers across the board in various industries, all the way from power to refining to renewables in wind, solar, as well as in cement, right? And we have customers across geographies, all the way from North America to India, and we are growing pretty fast. So we are super excited about our journey and about the impact that we are going to make on the manufacturing segment. Yeah.
Correct. That's quite interesting and quite ambitious as well. So yeah, like you correctly mentioned that everybody has data, but to get intelligence out of it is another task that we are facing presently. And I believe that you are contributing to a great cause. And all the best, all the best. It was lovely interaction, and Jagdish, I personally got to learn a lot from this interaction. So it was nice speaking with you.
Yeah, thanks, Mohit. Thanks for giving us this opportunity. I'm happy to be on the, happy to talk to you and share some of the insights. So, thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Jagdish. Yep. Bye-bye.